do we want to go straight into the speeches?
Let's go straight into the speeches. And what we did, Sam, is we kind of took it as general automatism as a general defense, if it was sound or not, and then we did specifics towards the case there in Toronto.
Yeah. So I think we did a very similar thing where we looked at how someone with autism might make that defense and whether that would be a valid or invalid defense, as well as the specific case in Toronto.
Okay, good.
So that's good. All right. We are going to start psychology, right?
Right. Okay.
And
I think my psychology
right?
person isn't here. So, Noel, can you read the psychology one too?
Wait, sir, I thought I was the...
Yeah, isn't Christoph?
Oh, Christoph, you're psychology. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Thank you.
Before I begin, I'm going to establish three things. The link to Alex's Asperger's to his awkward social behavior is linked to his awkward social behavior to his inability to relate to the opposite sex, and the stress and inability triggered on the automatism displayed on 1:45 Eastern Time, April 23rd, 2018, Toronto, Canada. First, let us look at his awkward behavior. It has been established that Alex has Asperger's syndrome. This is one of the disorders that is generally considered highly functional on the autism spectrum. Individuals with Asperger's syndrome, known as Aspergians, suffer through a number of impairments, namely social, but can also have challenges with motor skills. For example, people with Asperger's have difficulty with communication in a variety of ways. They have self-imposed rules or patterns that are usually very restrictive. Delayed motor development. Some children with Asperger's syndrome have delayed the development of fine and gross motor skills. Children with delayed and fine motor skills may struggle to hold a pencil correctly or when grasping objects with their fingers. Delayed gross motor skills include an inability to throw a ball overhand or swing on monkey bars, even when having repeated demonstration. This characteristic varies widely and can be seen both mildly and more severe cases. Poor social skills. Because of their limited fields of interest and low emotional ability, people with Asperger's feel isolated through most of their childhood and into adulthood. People with Asperger's do not try to make friends, but when they do, they are either temporarily successful or completely unsuccessful due to their lack of social skills. In the end, they sometimes display lack of interest or even curiosity for discussions, thoughts, and opinions of people they temporarily befriend. The development of harmful psychological problems. The potential of development of harmful psychological disorders typically occurs during puberty or immediately thereafter. The most common disorders are anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, young people with Asperger's have a high rates of suicide directly related to their anxiety and depression. 8 challenges with sexual behavior and Asperger's. Negating a essential and social world is challenging for people across the board, but people on the autism spectrum may struggle with additional challenges in communication and social interaction. Understanding these challenges and how to overcome them can lead to a much better sexual or romantic relationship. People with Asperger's may struggle to read body language. A great deal of sexual interactions relies on the ability to read body language, such as eye glance, stance, and facial expression. This type of nonverbal communication is a challenge for many on the autism spectrum, even with people with high functioning end of the autism spectrum. It may be instead of being awkward, but using plenty of verbal communication can help people with Asperger's. People with Asperger's have trouble with perspective talking. A person on the autism spectrum may struggle with mind blindness or a difficulty to taking others' perspectives. Those with Asperger's may feel empathy and care very much about feelings of others, but they would have a hard time in other people's feelings or understanding them. Physical touch can be different on the autism spectrum. People with a highly functioning autism report that some types of touch can be intense or unpleasant, and many are hypersensitive to touch. Because touch is a large part of the sexual and social interaction, this can be presented as a major challenge. It can avoid communication verbally and about the touch preferences and avoid surprises and unexpected touches. impulse control can be challenging for some. In some cases, teens and adults with highly functioning autism also struggle with impulse control, especially if they have an additional diagnosis of ADHD. Impulse control can have a challenge of areas of sexuality, and if it interferes with their social interactions and overall functioning, and some choose to work with a doctor or find medication to help. People with Asperger's may develop on different paces. While those with Asperger's syndrome have the same physical development as their peers, they may take longer to mature emotionally. This different development and pace can show itself in sexual interactions, where those with highly functional ASD may appear naive to others. Examples of typical difficulty that may be faced when someone with Asperger's syndrome causing them stress by rejection. Understanding nonverbal communication such as body language or tone, interpreting feelings and thoughts of others, relating to nonverbal uses of language such as idioms, jokes, or irony, limits to body awareness, for example, walking around obstacles or carrying out fine motor tasks, following social convictions such as respecting others' physical space. I ask you, was Alex autistic? Yes. Was this contributing factor in his stress? Yes. Did his inability to get along with women cause his stress? Yes. Alex on April 23rd, 2018 was not himself that day. He was clearly under the legal defense of automatism. We see no other ballot in today's round to vote for Alex, but to vote for Alex. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. And for psychology, we have it split between two people. First Sam and then Sahaj.
All right, so I just wanted to point out some common characteristic of autism. These include trouble with social interaction, communication problems, and repetitive patterns of behaviors. But notice that none of these indicate the inability to distinguish right from wrong. So to include autism spectrum disorder in the automatism defense would imply that they don't understand when they're doing something they shouldn't, which is just not true. For example, it's been shown that people with Asperger's often have very firm ideas of right and wrong and are very good at following clear rules. This actually makes them more likely to be aware of what they're doing, unlike what including autism spectrum disorder in the automatism defense would imply. This said, the spectrum includes a wide variety of people and characteristics, so not everyone will be like this. However, even with other forms of autism that show more symptoms, there's no specific mention of any misunderstanding of what's acceptable behavior and what's not. Sahaj, if you want to go now, you can.
All right, so autistic people understand rules and consequences of their actions as long as they're taught to them. The comprehension of consequences by autistic people should permit them to be held responsible for their actions, including criminal offenses. In society, we must punish those who commit crimes appropriately. This is supposed to stop people from committing crimes by having consequences. Autistic people are capable of understanding this concept, and so they should be punished appropriately. In addition, autism isn't linked to any lack of empathy towards other individuals. They do feel empathy and to others, so they understand how their actions could affect other people. If autistic people consider the trauma caused to others and still commit the crime, they must be legally prosecuted. Researchers agree that the heavy majority of autistic people are law-abiding citizens. Also, many ASD individuals have high intelligence levels, which may not allow them to use legal insanity as a defense in their court case.
All right, thank you. So we're going to be moving on to the law portion of the debate next.
Okay, who has law from our side?
I do. Suppose you committed a crime and we either caught you in the act or shortly thereafter. There were witnesses who saw you commit the crime. You have the murder weapon on you or near. You appear to the police that you are guilty and it was an open and shut, slam dunk case against you. You are going to go away to prison for a long period of time, or in some cases, you may even give up your life. Is this fair? Is this right? That is what today's debate is about: automatism, a defense that defies plain sight and requires you to look much more deeply in the details of what happened. This is not a cerebral mind game. It is one of the most interesting murder cases of the 20th century. On the morning of March 15th, 1921, at approximately 10:45 a.m., Mehmet Talat, the former Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire, left his home with the intention of purchasing gloves. He has been living in Berlin on 4 Hardenberg Strasse for more than 2 years, a city that he has fled to the following defeat of the Turkey in the First World War. Germany has granted him asylum as compensation for having been an ally during the World War. Not long after, Talat passes a young man who looks at him calmly, staring at him as though recognizing an image that has been engraved in his memory. The young man turns around and fires a shot. Talat is killed immediately, and his body remains fallen in front of a house on 27 Hardenberg Strasse. The police arrive quickly after hearing the cries of the witnesses. The young man tries to walk away. However, the crowd has gathered and catches up to him and begins beating him up. The police catch him with the gun. The witnesses say they saw him shoot the victim in the neck, and he admitted to shooting Talat. How does this young 26-year-old student shoot and kill in cold blood a man on the streets of Berlin in 1921, and 3 months later, after the trial is over, is acquitted of all charges by a jury? His defense fits into automatism. Yet on June 3rd, 1921, the judge and the jury deemed that Tellerian was in an unconscious state during the commission of the crime and committed the act at a time of mental turmoil. Tellerian was acquitted and walked away a free man from the courthouse. According to the experts who testified, Tellerian's actions were conditioned by the manifest remembrance of a traumatic experience. The physiological problems had surfaced because of the horrors he had witnessed when the members of his entire family were slaughtered before his eyes. His sisters raped. Sogham had been saved by being buried under the corpses of the slaughtered Armenians. Based on this conclusion of the medical council and the decision by the jury, the judge in Tellerian's trial had declared him not guilty on the grounds of temporary insanity. The nature of this defense: the automatism defense has no statutory basis. No act of parliament defines it, sets its limits, and governs its application. It is a common law defense depending on judicial decisions that have been made over the years, and in different jurisdictions. Different judges dealing with quite this similar cases have produced differing decisions. There are 2 particular features: that the lack or an altered state of unconsciousness and absence of volition. For our purpose today, we will define automatism as defined in these 2 court cases: action without conscious volition, Grayson PV in RV Cotto 1958, total alienation of reasoning amounting to a complete absence of self-control, Lord Hope in RV Ross 1991. In our case, automatism was triggered by PTSD and autism causing stress, leading to his inability to control his actions. Although stress is obviously an external factor, the courts have not allowed it to found a defense of sane automatism because the ordinary stress and disappointments of life, which are the common lot of mankind, do not constitute an external cause. However, this case is not a normal case, and our client is not a normal person. He had been diagnosed as autistic. However, a person with autism may start their day with a much higher level of stress and anxiety. This means that they may reach crisis point more quickly than others. Anxiety is very common in people with autism. Therefore, with the increased stress and with an event that would trigger his action, Alec menacing would legally fit into the use of defense of sane automatism because he was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, causing him to have significant difficulties in social interaction and nonverbal communication, along with restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior and interests.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to move over to Kieran and Gurmahak. And is Sana here yet? She had
Yeah, I'm
another name. Hey, Sana.
Yeah,
All right, that's great. So we're going to move on to our legal speech.
Okay. In a court of law, the Crown must prove that both actus reus and mens rea were present in the criminal activity that the defense had allegedly committed. Actus reus is a Latin word which translates to the guilty act in English. The guilty act refers to one of three situations. 1, a physical action, 2, failure to act, or 3, a state of being. Most criminal cases usually have actus reus present. However, it is the mens rea that is dependent on the facts of the case. Mens rea also originates from Latin and means the guilty mind. The automatism defense is generally used to prove how mens rea, or the guilty mind, was not present when the criminal activity occurred due to the individual not being in their right state of mind. However, from a legal standpoint, we believe that even if the individual had a mental condition that interfered with their normal thinking, their mind can still be considered guilty in the sense that if they had known of their illness or known of their symptoms before the incident, they should have taken the proper action to prevent themselves from doing something possibly illegal or harmful to others. Although they were not in their right mental state when the crime had been committed, they at least had the knowledge that their illness or symptoms may result in something inherently murderous or illegal to happen in the future. Moreover, if we consider those who drink excessively and cause harm to others or commit illegal actions as a part of automatism, then the blame is still put on the individual. When they had begun drinking, they had known of the mental and physical effects drinking excessively can cause, thereby demonstrating how they are still at fault in this situation. An example of this would be in the case of Alec Minazen, a man who happens to have autism spectrum disorder. Minazen had known of his disorder and of his murderous thoughts, which were not created in the spur of the moment due to his disorder. He had been thinking of murdering people for years, and instead of seeking help, he had planned and killed 10 people in 2018. Therefore, even though at the time people may not know of what they are doing, there are usually points in the past in which they could have stopped the entire situation from occurring, which means that the blame of a guilty mind can still be put on the individual.
As automatism is used in court as a viable defense, it lets people who have displayed both mens rea and actus rea get away with their actions. In many cases where victims have been subject to abuse or any type of offense, the perpetrator is able to get away with their crime because of this defense. In some cases, those who claim automatism as a defense may only be using such a defense to conceal extreme intoxication, which of course would have been self-induced. In fact, a ruling by the Ontario Court of Appeal established that if a person in a state of extreme intoxication, that such state is akin to automatism and has defense for violent crimes, anywhere from sexual assault to murder. The take from society is that it has the ability to excuse men from violent acts against women, only creating more fear in women with the knowledge that reporting a crime can be easily nullified with the use of this defense. Creating choices under the influence still qualifies as making a choice. With crimes committed because of intoxication, the person should still be held accountable as it is self-induced. The person should be held responsible for putting themselves in a state of intoxication and for the consequences of their action while in the state. If automatism is pleaded and the accused is not charged, the safety of citizens remain at risk. Those who are affected by making unconscious decisions should be receiving help in order to prevent needing to use automatism as a defense. At the bottom line, the victims of the offense by those who use automatism as an offense remain victims to the offense.
Legal automatism is used as a criminal defense. In many jurisdictions, there are a distinction between sane automatism and insane automatism. If proven that there are involuntariness in cause of mental illness or a disease of mind, it will be regarded as an insane automatism and will often result in a special verdict of not being guilty, and the reason being insanity. In the case of Alec Minazen, his defense argues that he was not criminally responsible for his actions on April 23, 2018, due to autism spectrum disorder. There are many instances, such as this particular case, where the defendant and their defense team use a mental illness as the reason why an illegal act is committed. During the trial, it is proved that his actions were illegal actions and not a psychiatric one. There can be many instances where someone can use their illness to state that the illegal act was done without their mind actively making a decision that led to the crime being committed. Even though, due to the illness, it can be proven that the defendant in fact was not in the right mind space, To understand why the result of their action was morally wrong, the defendant, like in this case, can be aware of their actions. Alex Minassian, in fact, admitted that he had planned out the attack months before the accident, in which the results state that had nothing to do with his autism or any sudden movements that his body made without his brain consciously controlling him. From the legal standpoint, to find an individual guilty of a crime, the Crown has to be able to prove that there is an actus reus as well as a mens rea. Actus reus meaning that the act had occurred, and mens rea being the guilty mind. The mens rea can be proved in this particular case because Alex had the intent to kill and did exactly that. Legal automatism shouldn't be allowed for defendant's defense to put a person's illness on trial, but instead the person themselves. Automatism shouldn't be used as a defense. The individual should know of their mental illness and take the action to prevent something bad from happening. Automatism may be wrongfully used as a defense to justify the actions of intoxicated people, and it can be planned in advance.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to ethics.
Okay, Robert, go ahead with the ethics speech.
Actions performed in a state of automatism are not subject to moral evaluation. While automatic actions often are, is the asymmetry between automatistic and automatic actions justified? In order to answer this question, we need a moral model. We need a model of moral accountability that does justice to our intuitions about a range of modes of agency, both pathological and non-pathological. Our aim in this paper is to lay the groundwork for the development of such a model. In the early morning of the 24th of May, 1987, Ken Parks drove 23 kilometers from his home in Pickerington, Ontario, to his in-law's house. He entered the house using the key he had brought with him. He strangled his father-in-law unconscious and fatally stabbed his mother-in-law. Parks then came to and drove to a nearby police station where he reported his actions to the police, saying that he thought he might have killed some people. Broughton established at 1994. Parks was charged with the murder of his mother-in-law, but acquitted on the grounds that he had committed his horrific actions while in a state of sleepwalking, essentially, and thus qualified for the defense of automatism. The legal defense of automatism is well established. Fenwick 1990, McSherry 1998, Ridgway 1996, and Schott 1991, and reflects the common sense judgment that individuals are not fully accountable for what they do in such states. But although it seems clear that automatism exculpates, it is not clear why it exculpates. What exactly is it about Parks' mental state that renders him non-culpable for his actions? In an engaging study of moral responsibility in automatism, Robert Schopp, 1991, agrees that the automaton is not responsible for what he or she does because he or she is unaware of how they contemplated acts that conflict with his or her other desires, and such morally relevant information as he or her self-images and his or her moral belief. Although the automaton's wants and beliefs may be the cause of their actions, they do not cause them in the manner of characteristic of ordinary human activity, and as such, the results are not deeply attributable to them. Schopp's account seems promising, but it generates the following problem. In some sense, there is no such thing as an ordinary human activity. Instead, human activities involve a range of modes of agency, from the deliberative and reflective to the automatic and non-intentional. While the contrast between deliberative agency and automatism seems clear, the contrast between automatism and more automatic, non-deliberative forms of ordinary human activity is anything but clear. Indeed, a number of authors argue that automaticity is the norm for human activity. Berg, 1997, Berg, and Schur, 1999. And this is problematic although automatism exculpates, it is less obvious that automaticity exculpates. Consider the following vignettes. A child runs out in front of Tim's new Volvo, and in order to avoid hitting her, he drives into an embankment, damaging his car. He's not deliberate of what he should do. He's barely aware of the child's presence before he acts. Number 2. Janice is walking down a dark alley late at night when she hears a cry for help. She responds automatically, running in the direction from which the voice seemed to come. If she had reflected, she would have chosen a less risky course of action, but she did not. She simply reacted to the sounds of distress. The ethics of using this offense are simple. It is as a prima facie argument. A person could do a bad thing, but they may not be criminally responsible if they are not in control of their actions. This is the core of our ethical argument. How could something be ethical if places blame on the person who is not responsible? It cannot be correct. This leads us to those who actually have the burden of proof. Once this offense is claimed, burden of proof. Which party bears the burden of proof differs depending on whether the case being advanced is one of sane automatism or insane automatism. We're claiming sane automatism. The onus of proof is on the prosecution, which must have proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused acted voluntarily. Should it fail to prove this, the accused must be acquitted. Therefore, the ethics of this debate are over with right now. If our opponents say that this is not ethical, they're going against their own argument. The place for following this exchange of ideas is in the courtroom. Our side fully supports the rights of the defendant to use this defense in order to provide them with the best opportunity for a fair trial. We like you to think about this, Your Honor. What is the other side worried about? Why are they fighting not to allow my client his rights? Which side is obvious? Which side is here before you today to stand up for the people's rights? Obviously, there's only one answer, and there can only be one vote in tonight's debate. Vote for the side of freedom and for the ethics allowing a defendant the ability to have a full and robust defense. Thank you.
All right, now we have Raj with our ethics piece.
Okay. So as all people know, people with mental issues are bound to do some crazy things. They may even commit murder and get away with it. Well, why is this, one might ask, right? I mean, is it not just common sense that people cannot be allowed to kill and go free? I mean, well, it has been shown that people feel that they can get away with crimes just because they fall under a certain defense. And some may say that they feel entitled to the right of killing. This itself is an issue that has to be dealt with. And if they're allowed to go on free, what stops them from just doing it again, right? And this is going to draw a trend of cold-blooded killing. This will be the new normal, and now autistic people will use the autism defense for their actions. If these crimes go undealt with, people who have suffered will be allowed to go free, right? And even similar cases can fall under this defense. If these crimes go undealt with, people who have suffered from similar cases will go through a mental trauma. If autistic people are allowed to go free after a crime, the victim and loved ones' pain is going to be unmeasurable. They deserve some sort of proof that what has occurred will not be performed again. And then, even if this does happen, right, there's going to be a stereotype that mental people are killers. People will not want to talk to someone that is mentally ill. And this will shatter the hopes and dreams of many mental people with no criminal record either, because they're just going to fall under the stereotype. No person should be faced with the consequence of a crime that they have not committed. They cannot fall under a stereotype. They cannot be feared or looked down upon. They should be entitled to the rights that every individual has, right? They should be measured equally, just like a normal, regular person. They can't just be freed just because they fall under an defense.
All right, thanks, Raj. So next, I believe we are moving on to the questions. I have asked you guys to write down some questions, and I hope you've got some written down. So do you guys want to ask your questions first, and the people from our side can respond?
Okay, that'd be fine. Robert, go ahead.
I only have, I think, one question, and it was about one of the points your side brought up, it was, if I remember correctly, your side used
Robert,
multiple studies that said a wide range of people. Sorry. Yes, you studies. Sorry. Yes, sir.
yeah, hey, Robert, we're having difficulty.
Internet.
It's going, the bandwidth is something. Maybe take off the video and just go audio and ask the question.
Okay. Previously during the argument, you guys stated we used a bunch of studies that use a wide range of people who could fall under the legal definition of automatism. By using that, doesn't it kind of make it irrelevant considering the fact that it's still just inherently just studies and not relevant to who this person is that we are currently talking about, and the fact that he himself has stated multiple times that he wasn't in the right clear state of mind?
Can I go? Even if we discuss the fact that he said he was not in the right state of mind, he also admitted to the fact that he did what he did with a plan. It wasn't like he just wasn't in the right state of mind, so he did something wrong. He had a plan. He rented out a van months before the accident. He planned out that he was going to an event to pretty much set a world record to kill his 100-something people, I'm pretty sure. And then, but the only reason he changed his mind was because he was in downtown and he found a group of people that he thought would be a good amount of time to kill. So it's even though he says he wasn't in the right state of mind, he was conscious because he had thought of this and planned it out before he did anything.
Add to that again. Earlier, though he may have planned it out, can we agree that what you're thinking of as a defense of this is that that couldn't be just one singular point, that he was just thinking about this throughout the months? And if he was, can we agree that somebody's mental state can be not unreliable, but sort of distressed consistently throughout months to lead somebody to do that, and only when they realize the consequences of their actions as they're doing it can they stop it?
It's not about stopping. As if they see that they're doing something or if they're planning something bad, it should be their job to figure out that, oh, this is not morally right. That when they're thinking, they should have done something right away instead of doing something that crazy.
But we know this man has autism and many other disorders. So morally speaking, his mind is very impaired and learning the same ways or identifying good or bad the same way we do. So wouldn't that classify automatism, legally speaking?
To this one?
Sure.
Thanks. All right. So when we're looking at who we ought to and ought not punish in terms of the automatism defense, you gesture a lot to if they were in the right state of mind. And I feel like you have a very low standard for what qualifies for a wrong state of mind. So for instance, you talk a lot about how people with autism or people with various things that are stressing them shouldn't be culpable to the crimes that they commit, which worries me quite a bit because I see this person who knew very well what they were doing. Had a very clear ideology that they explained after in an interview with a law enforcement official. And they had a very clear plan. This was someone who was very much so in the mind to logically work things out. And he was also someone that was in a state of mind where he could say, okay, it is irresponsible of me to drive down the busiest street in the country in a van that I'm using in a plan to, as Grandma Heck said, kill a lot of people. And so it seems like any reasonable person, including him, would have known that what they were doing was going to end up killing people. It is incredibly difficult, so much so that I don't think I've seen a case where this existed to prove that someone was in an automatismic state for that significant a period of time where they could create an entire plan and then carry it out over a period of months.
if I may respond to that, like I said earlier, someone could mentally be distressed and mentally and physically think about doing this for months and months on end, and the only time when they can truly figure out what they're doing is wrong is when it's actually happening to them and when they're actually doing it. It's sort of like you think about doing something and you don't really know what's going to happen until you physically do it. Anyone can plan and overplan anything for as long as they can, but until they actually see and physically do it, they'll never have the first-hand experience. It's like practicing something. You can always watch YouTube videos or tutorials, but until you go out and actually do it, you in reality don't have that muscle memory or anything to physically go against what they said. Go against what it does. Like I said previously, he does have autism, and that allows his brain to first off not function at the same way as ours do, in the sense of logically he thinks faster, as it's shown in the interview and when he was talking about it. And morally, we all know what he did was wrong, but we can all have to at least give it to him that whatever he was associated with, whatever the disease in his mind was doing to him, he cannot legally be responsible for it because he himself does not control. It has been scientifically shown in multiple studies that what our brain does for us is sort of what our brain does for us is sort of what we interpret as our own free will. And given that this happens to us normally, his brain could be doing all these powerful things to his mind, making him think about all these, and he could always interpret it as, oh wow, here's what I want to do, when in reality it's his brain mixed with his autism or personality disorder and such.
Is every person not just their brain commanding them to do certain things? If we set the standard that you want to set, a ridiculous amount of crimes would go unpunished and unlooked at in the justice system. You've said that he wasn't in the right state of mind because he has difficulty with social interactions, or maybe he didn't know what he was doing was wrong. There are a lot of people, in fact, most people commit crimes believing them to be just. And if we set the standard of, okay, you are autistic and you believe what you're doing to be just, then that essentially gives autistic people a very wide scope to commit crime. In addition, that means that we're infantilizing them. We're treating them like children, people who don't have the moral culpability to do wrong acts in the same way that we might. He had a very clear and explainable thought process, which was something that he could have gone through. Although he was autistic, he was very smart. He was a very intelligent person, very high functioning. And he did have the ability to logically go through what he was thinking and to point out to himself that he ought not do it. It is within his grasp to do good things, and it is within the grasp of autistic people not to commit murder or to commit crimes, because they are capable of it, and they do have a right and conscious state of mind.
Oh, okay. Personally, like you said earlier about the previously infantilization, the amount of murders that would go past, we can always inherit, with the autism part, we can always assume that his mind hasn't always been like that. We can always assume that there was a beginning to these thoughts and there's an end to these thoughts, and the end tragically involved 10 people. What we can always assume is that since what you said previously was that it would allow autistic people to kill or murder more often, that's not what I was trying to make. What I was personally trying to say was that this man is obviously very, very sort of mentally disturbed. And what you said previously about the murders, like how many people who commit murders consider them just, many of those people who consider them just do not have the added disadvantage or advantage, if you were to be in the people who commit the murder shoes. They don't have the added, oh, this other thing's piled on top. It's sort of how many people always have are sad, but then many people are also depressed, and they have all these things that layers on top of them, which creates these immeasurable pushes that their brain and them, as they know themselves, that they cannot resist. That's what I'm trying to say for our client right now. He, while being incredibly intelligent, also does have the capability to think about these things in the same way he thinks intelligently, as if he was thinking about something normal. In his mind, killing was normal, so he could think of it as if it was just a day-to-day thing. Like, I remember what was his job, like accounting or so and such. He can always think about it as if it was that, as something day-to-day, as something that he could just think in the back of his mind and bring it up when he needed. What I was trying to say was that since he could think like this and wasn't thinking the same way that we would think on murder, which would be in the test murder, as most of us are supposed to, he doesn't think of it as that. He thinks of it as a way, or let's say a means to an end, essentially. So his mind is inherently or currently not working the same way ours would be. And while yes, this may set a semi-low bar, it's still a bar to hit, and there are multiple other murders, multiple other mass murders in the same way him always clear that bar instead of him. He himself does not meet that bar currently, but like you said, the autistic people who also commit murders will potentially and always probably meet that bar.
So,
All right. Can we move on to the next question? Does anyone from our side have any questions? Just speak if you have one.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure, Rush.
If you let somebody go free under the autism defense, what stops them from just going and doing it again?
If you don't mind, I may answer. As I said in my psychological speech, I talk about general awareness and how people can, with Asperger's syndrome, can prevent them from doing certain actions from their Asperger's from general awareness. And so if we were to let this man go and him realizing what he did was wrong, and how it can help him control his Asperger's syndrome more efficiently than he was before.
If I can add to that, he also, at the end of his crimes, he admitted that he thought it was a video game, and now everybody knows video games. Whenever you don't meet a certain criteria, always have consequences. Now that he knows about the consequences, and now that he is currently able to identify what he did wrong and understand what he did was wrong, that could be a prevention tool from stopping him from committing the murder. Because now, if we're going to split hairs with this, he could now realize that, oh, I can't get away with this, so I don't want to do that again. Or he could realize what I did was wrong, and he has mental ability now to realize what he did was wrong. But under that current state, he didn't, because he wasn't thinking about whether or not the consequences would pile up and get him, or that they.
Yeah, but how do you know that he completely understands that what he did was wrong and he won't do it again? How do you know it's not just an act just so he can go free and do it again? How do you know that?
Sorry, even as kids, we grow up, if we do something wrong, there's a punishment involved, which makes, because if we got away with everything that we did as a kid, we would obviously keep on repeating it. Most of the circumstances, we would repeat it. So I feel like there should be punishment allowed, or there should be something, because him getting away with it would just give the person a sort of sense oh, I can get away with anything I want because let's just say I have autism and I can use that as an excuse now. It's I don't know if you're just saying that they might learn, but what if there are chances that they will not learn and they will repeat everything that they did beforehand?
If I can answer the first question, isn't there inherently a certain risk to allowing anybody who is charged with the crime to go? There's always a risk to allowing somebody of that who've been charged or claimed to be alleged to a crime, letting them go. There's always a risk to that. There's a 1,000% certainty knowing that he won't commit the crime. But with what we see currently, there's a huge limiting risk factor. There's about a 95% chance that he will not. And that's a 5% chance that he might. And are we going to judge somebody of the potential that they're going to commit a crime, or do we have the physical proof that they already haven't committed a crime? Because we just charge them based off the potential to commit a crime. That's minority report. And
So wait, let me get this straight. What you're basically saying is if somebody does a murder once, it's fine. You can let them go. But the chances of them doing it again is like completely low. Is that what you're saying? Like they won't do it
I'm
again. Totally
I'm saying
saying
that
that they can get away with it and knowing that they'll get away with it and no charges are going to be put on them. Do you think that they won't do it again?
I'm saying that the context of the murder or the context of what he did currently is relevant. What I mean by saying there's a significant risk to allowing people to be free based off alleged crimes is that we don't have a complete certainty to know whether or not they won't commit it. Somebody could have never committed a crime and gone to jail, and now they're all mad and stuff and want to do it now. But I'm saying currently here is that the best way to prevent someone from actually committing a crime is to hold them for the crime they've already committed. And since our client hasn't committed a crime due to the automatism defense, why should we hold him back down to it? We could help him in the prison system, and we could help him outside of this. But what I'm saying is that currently, due to automatism defense, he should be at least free of going to jail to this point because right now he legally meets that criteria.
He legally meets the criteria, but it could, again, it's just, we're just going back and forth about, yeah, he might not do it. That's not what happened. And one of the things about the autism, in one of the articles that we read was about how he didn't feel no remorse, and that's what people were mad at him for. But that's something that happens with the autism disease, that like they don't necessarily feel remorse. That could mean that even though he figured out what he did was wrong, he didn't feel bad for it, meaning that he can repeat the same action because he won't feel bad or any remorse for what he did in the first place, so he might not feel it again, which might lead him to do something that he already did, even though he could have realized that he might not be right.
Like you said, no remorse is linked with autism and his mental disease, which means, legally speaking, it would still count as an automatism defense. While yes, the no remorse, legally speaking, yes, sorry, the no remorse part counts into our point because if no remorse is linked with what he did, then now we can work to stop that from happening again and help him out with that. But since no remorse is a known factor, as you stated, a known factor with his mental illness, he now legally still falls under the legal defense of automatism.
Okay, people without a sort of like any sort of disease can be not remorseful for the action. That doesn't mean that like that is.
Sorry, but those people who usually commit those crimes without the no remorse usually have other mental illnesses like sociopathy, psychopathy, and many other things. They may not feel remorse, but that's because they look normal in our state. Like look at Ted Bundy. He most likely didn't feel remorse for those killings, and he looked as normal to us. Autism, while he doesn't look, autism actually has the point of making the person. It actually alters their brain and makes them not as normal as the baseline human standard would be. If we use the examples of people who don't feel remorse without autism, then we're just gonna look into find other mental illnesses they have, like sociopathy, psychopathy, depression, other illnesses that cause somebody to kill people. I mean, even bipolar disorder causes people to kill people points in time. It's just that there are other mental illnesses that can legally fall under this, and one we're using right now is autism.
All right. Does anyone from your side have a question? And I don't know how many more you want to do. That's up to you.
Let's go ahead and go to the rebuttals or whatever you want to, so we can have some little time to reflect upon this. I think reflection would probably be better than anything else. Noel, can you do a rebuttal for us?
So
put your camera back on, please.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so in conclusion, I think that our side has the better arguments overall. I mean, because we are talking about automatism in this specific case, and we have brought up points, for example, that he wasn't in his right mind at the time. You can't really hold somebody accountable if they're autistic, as we've said. I mean, if he wasn't in his right mind, and as they're saying, I mean, they've brought up saying that an autistic person is different from a normal person. So then they're agreeing in our sense that we can't really hold them accountable as we would what we consider a normal person, just because of the simple fact that their brain works different than ours. And to bring up again, like how they said, we could just go back and forth on releasing them, and if not, and whether or not they'll repeat the crime or not. And I think it just becomes a question of did they have an intention of well thought out plan of what they were going to do or not, and their mental state. And in this case, you can see how his aspirin autism had a large impact on his actions, and therefore he shouldn't be held accountable for his for what he did during that time period.
Thank you.
All right. As shown during the duration of this debate, autistic people, those with Asperger's syndrome, and the man who ran the van onto that sidewalk are fully in control of their behavior, possessing a mens rea, even though they have social difficulties. It's been brought up many times that he is not in his right mind. Although I don't know what that means legally, the standard that we have set is that they must lose full control. So for instance, sleepwalking loses full control. Something like becoming incredibly drunk, blackout drunk specifically, losing full control. Someone having social difficulties, possibly stressors from anxiety, depression, autism, does not meet the mental faculties reduced necessary to lose full control. It was very clear he had a plan. He had been planning for a very long time based on an ideology that he held about the way that the world works in relation to women, in relation to relationships, and in relation to the way that he cannot get laid. It was very clear that even if he was not in full control, he knew that what he was doing while he was in control over the past many, many months was wrong. He knew that he would be killing many people. He knew that he would be driving down one of the busiest streets in the nation with a van. And he knew when he made that turn onto the sidewalk what he would be doing. It was very clear that he was conscious and able to recognize the purpose of his own actions, so much so that he could explain the exact thought process of the actions after the events of that morning. He drove down one of the busiest streets in the country of his own volition. He steered into the sidewalk of his own volition. He killed of his own volition, and he only stopped because a drink spilled on his windshield. He is the type of person that does not feel remorse. He is the type of person that needs to be separated from the general population, because it seems as if the only thing stopping him from committing more crimes on that instance and in the future, if we do not imprison him, is chance. The chance that maybe someday he magically loses his ideology, that he magically gains the ability to tell right from wrong, and that magically a drink flies onto his windshield. I think it's very clear that ethically, legally, and psychologically, this person was culpable, conscious, and not qualifying for the automatism defense. Thank you very much, and I think we're going to move on to the next section.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let me get up here. And let's see, what did you learn? Sam, start with you. What did you learn from doing this?
Yeah, I learned a lot about sort of the how the criminal justice system looks at mental state, which is crazy. It's really difficult to discern what different countries have in terms of like what mental state you need to be in to like be culpable of a crime, and like sort of what disorders, what factors can contribute to that. There was a really interesting case of a guy who, and this case really should have gone to the Supreme Court of Canada. He was drinking really heavily, and then he went out and he hit. I think he got into a car accident or hit someone with his car or something like that. But he was drinking beforehand. The case was that because he was drunk, he was not culpable of the crime at the time, and we treat that a little bit differently because he did it. He intoxicated himself voluntarily. I also learned a lot about how the differences between like I don't know what you guys would call it, but sometimes over here we call it common law,
yeah.
and like how certain like legal doctrines work. The difference between like insane and non-insane automatism. There's a lot of really interesting legal stuff that I learned through this.
Okay, very good. Noel, what'd you learn?
Yeah, I just learned how they view automatism and how, like in this case, even though they are claiming automatism, he should still be held responsible to some degree, even though he has, even though you look at it deeply, like as we did, and we tried to defend that he had the mental illness and his autism got in the way. You should still be held responsible. That's what I learned.
Okay, Robert, what'd you learn? Robert?
I learned it's kind of really easy to sort of stretch multiple definitions to fit under a banner under this case, like how surprisingly I managed to stretch that the automatism to encompass a wide range of other things that have some relation and correlation to the case. So that makes me a bit more skeptical when looking at like law and such, because now it just shows how easy it is to change somebody's thoughts on something by rewording a few things that have like a perceived relevance but aren't really completely relevant to the case.
Yeah, it sounds like you could do it after the fact, is what you're saying, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go. Sam, other Sam, female Sam, could you go ahead and do what you learned?
Yeah, sure. So I did psychology, so I did a lot of research on autism spectrum disorder. So I learned a lot about how that impacts people and what it can do, and then that effect on the legal system. Seeing, like other Sam was saying, just how different people, like different systems, see like how they view mental state as like differently.
Okay,
Yeah, just that.
that's good. Mackenzie, what'd you learn from listening to this today?
I find it very interesting, like everybody's standpoints from it, and I've just been listening to it, kind of trying to like take in points and just listen to what everyone's saying, and I just find it really interesting how everybody like talks about autism and how people like refer to it, like Asperger's, like how I've noticed how some people mention Asperger's and how other people use like different terms, and I just kind of find that interesting.
Okay, thank you. Marcus, what'd you learn? And then Sam, I'll let you go with the rest of your group. Okay, Marcus, go ahead. What'd you learn?
Essentially, what I learned is, I guess I learned more about the Automatism Defense and, the explanations of like how it can be used.
Okay. Sam, could you have your other people say something?
Yeah, sure. So let's go to who haven't I heard from yet? Gurmahek?
So I did the legal standpoint, and it was crazy learning about how like some of the cases that have happened previously. Like there is this one case, I think it was mentioned as well, about this guy who like stabbed, I think, or killed his mother-in-law and like injured his father-in-law, and then went straight to the police officer thinking that he had killed someone. And there's so many other cases that like we found out when we were doing research, and it's crazy how like someone can use like this as not excuse, but as a defense to get away with something like that. And I know like there might not be conscience, but everything leads up to something. Like it can't just be someone randomly one day like gets intoxicated or something happens and they decide to like go kill someone. It's like something that's going on, and I feel like a lot of these people need help. Like, yeah, jail might not be the best place for them right now, but I feel like they should receive some sort of punishment, and they should also be getting help to treat like their mental illness.
Thank you.
All right, Sahaj?
So I learned a lot, but the key points I learned was that what autistic people could comprehend and what they could think through and not, and how a person having autism could affect their legal case.
All right, Raj.
Yeah, I learned like how mental issues stand in a court, like based off of on an ethical point of view, and how society will be like roughly affected, and like based on series of how rumors could be like that mentally ill people can kill if they're just let free to go, and it could like affect society in a general way, and people could like really treat them differently, and it'll just ruin their ability in the end, not really helping them. So giving them a punishment would stand, I mean, reasonable, I would say. But yeah, that's what I learned.
All right, and then finally, Sana.
So for in my I researched for the legal part, so I already knew a lot about the law and the justice system in Canada because I'm taking a law class right now. So I knew terms like mens rea and actus reus, but it was interesting to see how that fits in when people aren't in their right state of mind when they commit crimes. And anyways, sorry if you heard that, but it was just interesting to see how you can use mental states to not get out of a crime, but get a lesser charge or explain why you did something in a different manner. It was just interesting to see that.
Hey, what'd you learn, Clayton?
I am familiar with a lot of the defense from some other conversations we had with our peers in the past about this. So it's for me, it's just listening and to our students and watching how mature they are able to kind of pick and poke through our legal system. And it's just interesting for me as an educator to watch that thought process. I didn't see the entire thought process. I just kind of look at the documents that the kids are putting together. But listening to all the students, both south and north of the border, I'm sure that if we flip sides, that the conversations would have been similar. So I see that there is a lot of commonality in the thought process of our students on either side of the border. So that's good to see.
Actually, by doing this, you can kind of see, I imagine we're all against the gentleman is the issue. Okay. But there's one thing I learned, I wanted to share it. I think it'd be kind of neat. As a defense, this is not a bad defense. And remember that just because a person uses this as a defense, it's still up to the jury or the judge in the court to decide if it's correct or not. So we can't just diminish their ability, especially in common law, because it's not statute. If it was statute, this probably would have been thrown out a long time ago. But since it's common practice, that's one of the reasons why, like Robert said, it's such a broad thing. It's almost as broad as the autism spectrum. And, to get somebody identified as autism could be a whole nother issue because that's a spectrum that is interesting in of itself. So I really did appreciate learning a whole lot. Has the trial, last time I heard it was in December, what's happening with the trial?
Man, I'm not sure. I haven't kept up with it. I think that it's still going on as of right now.
Yeah, it's been on the news. There's a period of time where it's on the news every single day.
Right.
Considering how long ago it has occurred. But lately, our news has been dominated by something else. So the trial is still ongoing. It's just not being.
Well, we're still in the middle of COVID stuff, and then in the middle of the election, and they shut down our state capitol because of problems that may be coming on Wednesday. So you just don't know what in the world's going on. So we're your neighbors to the south are in big disarray.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for doing this. We really appreciate you. It was a really good conversation, and I think we all learned quite a bit from it.
Okay, if y'all decide what you would like to do for February, just let us know, and if you got another topic or something, and we'll get back with each other. Okay.
All right. Cool.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
right, guys, we're gonna meet back briefly in the Teams meeting just to plan a little bit for the future. It'll be quick. I promise you, less than 10. All right.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Texas. Thanks, Del Valle.
All right, have a good day.
Bye.
Same.
Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.